Hello there. Steve has given me this opportunity to kind of, I guess, freelance, improvise, talk about something dear to my heart, which is jazz education. I've been a jazz educator since I have been an educator. In 1970, I started teaching, and I have been doing jazz ever since, and I still am. That's what I do. I've done a lot of other things, but my heart has always been jazz, and I do not apologize for that. I want to talk about jazz education then. By then, I'm talking about my experience, which begins in the middle and early 60s, and now. The advantages, the disadvantages, the cautions, the opportunities. There was no Jamie Aebersold or digital this or digital that or YouTube or any of that when I decided I wanted to play improvisational music, which at that time included jazz and R&B. I'm a kid. I'm 14, 15 years of age. I'm a trombone player, so I got a few heroes, namely CJH Johnson. But I realized I did not know a whole lot. And although I was in a really good high school band program with a great band director, Turner Covington, who played trombone, I felt a need to expand my knowledge. And I used to hear this guy practicing, who I knew was playing gigs around and going on the road and that kind of thing. And one day I decided just to walk into his backyard where he practiced and disturb him. Because I wanted to know the intricacies of writing music. How do I transpose for trumpet and sax and this and that and, you know, chord structures and blah, blah. Now, I had a basis of music theory, okay? You know, I knew all my keys, all 12. You have to know that. That's just basic. If you don't know that, you can't do anything with this music we call jazz. I didn't know that. And this guy was offended that I disturbed him. And he gave me a challenge, he gave me an assignment, he talked to me, and he thought that I probably would never bother him again because he gave me some work to do. But to his surprise, I showed up the next day with that assignment written out. A piece called Blue Moon, I never will forget it, written out for trombone, alto, sax, and trumpet. I had a friend who played alto, I had a friend who played trumpet, and I needed to know how to write music for them that we could all play together. He looked at it, and he was very, very pleased. He was also very shocked because he truly thought that he would never see me again. Now, that got me past the door. And then he invited me to his rehearsal. And he wanted me to show up and just play with his band. It was called a Progressive Triangle, musicians from Sarasota, Manatee, and Pinellas County. And it was the only group like that in the area. They were hot. All young guys doing their thing. And I went to the rehearsal, and I was a good player. I could read, but when it came to improvisation, I didn't know anything, and they didn't tell me anything. And so my first solo was god awful. Now, some people say that's mean, but what they were doing was demonstrating to me that I had gaps in my knowledge and understanding, and if I wanted to play this music, I had some learning to do. That abundantly clear. I could hear how bad that sounded, and so could everybody else. So now, what's next? And here we go. Let's learn the chord construction. Let's learn chord scale application. And let's start transcribing. Let's start listening to recordings and then copying the exact solos that these guys are playing, these pros are playing. Let's develop your ear and a sense of language and vocabulary and all that stuff that you need in order to play this music right. And that started my journey. And I've continued that. Even in my final days of teaching in Boca Ciega, we did all the stuff that was available to us, whether it was YouTube or digital for exercises written out in Finale and all of that. We did all of those things that were available to us, and transposition and chord construction and chords and scale application, motor application. We did all of that. But the weekly assignment was you will bring in an excerpt that you've transcribed, and you will play with the recording for the class every week. That was the secret to my success at Boca Ciega Jazz program. I have found that a lot of people don't do that. Most don't. And in my study of Barry Harris, I noticed that his maiden voyage into this music was transcribing Bud Powell's solo. Bud was no easy thing. As he said, Bud was maybe the epitome of jazz. So this is difficult stuff, but this is how he started. And we have a whole lot of people who have a quest for jazz education who do not want to do the hard work and undertake the due diligence that is necessary. And transcription is absolutely necessary. And if you're not listening to jazz on a daily basis, how are you going to play it? Because it's not like you hear this music in the public sphere all the time. And if you can't hear it, you can't play it. And the best way to hear it and play it is to transcribe. And we find that in a whole lot of jazz programs in schools, that is the most neglected aspect of the kids' training, and yet it is perhaps most important. I have heard about jazz professors who take a dim view at jazz or of jazz practitioners. People who may not have the master's degree or even a bachelor's degree or whatever, who just learn from experimentation, from playing, from gigging, from jam sessions. They have extraordinary knowledge and ability. But because they don't have that sheepskin and they're not formal, they are held in low regard. And yet sometimes too much of the technical aspect and the academia renders the jazz sterile. If you're going to play jazz, it's got to be played with a lot of emotion. And there's no better way to play it with emotion than to imitate what people at the highest level are doing. So in this conversation, I am pushing for less reliance on the technical and more transcription. I am also finding that there are people who think that they can take shortcuts to jazz. Well, I don't have to practice my Auburn method or my Clark or my Close or the Universal method of sax or all the standard method books that classical players use to develop fluency and technique. That's not right. And I don't have to learn to play the Bluebells of Scotland or the Hummel or improvisation and riffs or whatever the standard literature is, the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, whatever those things are. I don't have to learn those because I'm going to play jazz. Oh, you have to learn those too. Because that is the stuff that disciplines your playing, and your jazz will never be any better than your ability to play your instrument, because that is what you communicate through. So more transcription and more emphasis on technical training of the classical sort. In classical music, we have our masters. We can all go to Bach and Brahms and Beethoven. But somehow, we want to start playing jazz with Kenny G. How you gonna skip past Pops? How you gonna skip past Sonny Rollins? How you gonna skip past Bean? How you gonna skip past Prez? You can't do it. You've got to learn the masters in jazz just like you learn the masters in classical literature. So these are my concerns. This is my rant. Respect for the masters, study the masters. Study your instrument and practice it just like the classical people do. Become a master of your instrument, and then transcribe to develop your ear, your sense of swing, and to know the language of the masters. This is important. And as we move down this road to jazz education, let's not just make it having a stage band, a jazz band on stage playing charts. Let's make it all about the improvisation, which is what jazz really is about. Improvisation. Because the original jazz musicians didn't read or write music. It was all right here and right here. Thank you very much.